great to have you here today on this very, very special day. We'll talk more about how special this day is for us as we move along. As we get started, I'm going to ask you again to please sign the attendance sheet as it makes its round around the room. And you also have release forms in front of you, so if you would sign those as well, I would appreciate it. I want to make a couple of announcements, and then we're going to sort of move on into what we have planned for today. I wanted to announce, and I really sort of was going to defer to Robert. Anybody see Robert today? Robert Gill? No? But anyway, I saw this from him, and I just thought I would make the announcement because he's been so beautiful with coming here and participating with us with the Roundtable. There is something called the intellectual community. You may know that. No, I don't see any recognition on folks' faces. But this is established by Dr. Robert Hill, and it was launched on August the 26th. It's a free resource for the higher ed leadership concentration students, an intellectual community called the Higher Ed Leadership Concentration Cafe. And I'm just saying some more information about that. If you don't know about it, you can contact Robert Hill on that. All right, we also want to congratulate Dr. Mary Kolosinski, who with two of her other two co-writers with her, just published a book called Digital Solidarity in Education, which comes out tomorrow. And this book promotes equity, diversity, and academic excellence through innovative instructional programs. And it's available through the Taylor and Francis e-bookstore. I imagine any bookstore will probably carry it. But she's one of ours. I happen to see this. I just thought I would share it just in case, okay? Today is the 12th anniversary of 9/11, and just recently it was the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and that was commemorated. And so that is our inspiration for our discussion today, really in every sense of the word roundtable today. No panel, no, just me up here trying to keep it on track. So we really are going to just engage in our discussion today. And those are the two events that inspired what we're going to talk about today, but I also wanted to mention this, that this past month, on August 13th, marked the 5th anniversary of the Scholars Roundtable and Forum. And so, because this is a special time for us, I invited my partner in crime to come back and be with us today. And we're so happy that he accepted our invitation. Dr. Hose is here today. And we just know, and I don't know if you do, that he is busy writing books and being here and there and just enjoying his retirement. So I'm going to ask my partner to just give greetings from where he is right now.
Good afternoon. It is good to be back. As you all said, August 13th, 5 years ago, you and I came together and presented to you this Scholars Roundtable. I enjoyed 4 years of that, and the life that she had a year ago took the leadership and she carried on the position. I also want to thank you, all of you. I know all of you who have been very much a part of this throughout those 5 years, and I am very, very grateful for that. It is wonderful when you can create something that is important enough that people feel the need to continue it. And so I'm so pleased that you all continue this. The two issues that you are going to discuss today are very, very important. I'm sure you know more about it as much as I do, and I'm delighted to be a part of it. I'm enjoying my retirement. My wife and I finally are in sync, and that we're both retired, doing quite a bit of traveling, enjoying the grandkids, but we are pleased that we have a life of our own, away from our 2 daughters, away from our 2 granddaughters. So she and I are plotting to get up each day and doing things that we feel good about, but most importantly, doing those together. And as I said to Joanne just a few minutes ago, December the 15th will be our 40th wedding anniversary. So we have been blessed. I'm delighted to come out and share today with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And welcome. Okay. And you can come back any second. Let's see the month. All right. Yes.
I just want to say, warn people, those are peanut butter pretzels, so if you're allergic, I just want you to know that. Okay? Sorry.
No problem. We're among friends here. This is the way I'd like to take off with our session today. I'd like to show you videos from these events. The first video I'm going to show you is President Obama's speech at the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. We want to talk about that in light as the bulletin went out or the announcement went out. See that through the eyes of higher education, because that's really why we're here, a scholarly type of response to this. What prompted all of the event, not so much the celebration of it all, but what it all meant, where you see it maybe going in the future, where it should be going, your thoughts, that's the discussion part of that. And hopefully these videos are going to inspire that type of conversation. So we'll have a bit of a conversation in there. We will go to a short video on the 9/11, and then we'll talk about that a bit. And then we sort of want to see the commonalities of it all. You know, see if there are some similarities in the events leading up, or what the impact was, or what it should be, similarities and differences, and then thoughts about, you know, what really should, or what would we like to see in the future? What can we do, you know, to make this society a very much better place to live, if you will. And so this is what's going to feed us today and feed the discussion. Any questions? Is that kind of clear? All right, okay.
Fellow Americans. 5 decades ago today, Americans came to this honored place to lay claim to a promise made at our founding. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. In 1963, almost 200 years after those words were set to paper, a full century after a great war was fought and emancipation proclaimed, that promise, those truths, remained unmet. And so they came by the thousands from every corner of our country. Men and women, young and old, blacks who long for freedom, and whites who can no longer accept freedom for themselves while witnessing the subjugation of others. Across the land, congregations sent them off with food and with prayer. In the middle of the night, entire blocks of Harlem came out to wish them well. With a few dollars they scrimped from their labor. Some bought tickets and boarded buses, even if they couldn't always sit where they wanted to sit. Those with less money, hitchhiked or walked. There were seamstresses, steel workers, students and teachers, maids and Pullman porters. They shared simple meals and bunked together on floors. And then, on a hot summer day, they assembled here in our nation's capital, under the shadow of the great emancipator, to offer testimony of injustice, to petition their government for redress, and to awaken America's long slumbering conscience. We rightly and best remember Dr. King's soaring oratory that day. How he gave mighty voice to the quiet hopes of millions. How he offered a salvation path for oppressed and oppressors alike. His words belong to the ages, possessing a power and prophecy unmatched in our time. But we would do well to recall that day itself also belonged to those ordinary people whose names never appeared in the history books, never got on TV. Many had gone to segregated schools and sat at segregated lunch counters. They lived in towns where they couldn't vote, in cities where their votes didn't matter. There were couples in love who couldn't marry. Soldiers who fought for freedom abroad that they found denied to them at home. They had seen loved ones beaten, children fire hosed. They had every reason to lash out in anger or resign themselves to a bitter fate. And yet, they chose a different path. In the face of hatred, they prayed for their tormentors. In the face of violence, they stood up and sat in with the moral force of nonviolence. Willingly, they went to jail to protest unjust laws, their cells swelling with the sound of freedom songs. A lifetime of indignities had taught them that no man can take away the dignity and grace that God grants us. They had learned through hard experience what Frederick Douglass once taught, that freedom is not given, it must be won through struggle and discipline, persistence and faith. That was the spirit they brought here that day. That was the spirit young people like John Lewis brought to that day. That was the spirit that they carried with them like a torch back to their cities and their neighborhoods. That steady flame of conscience and courage that would sustain them through the campaigns to come. Through boycotts, voter registration drives, smaller marches from the spotlight. Through the loss of 4 little girls in Birmingham, the carnage of Edmund Pettus Bridge, the agony of Dallas, California, Memphis. Through setbacks and heartbreaks and gnawing doubt, that flame of justice flickered. It never died. And because they kept marching, America changed. Because they marched, the civil rights law was passed. Because they marched, a voting rights law was signed. Because they marched, doors of opportunity and education swung open so their daughters and sons could finally imagine a life for themselves beyond washing somebody else's laundry or shining somebody else's shoes. Because they marched, city councils changed, and state legislatures changed, and Congress changed, and yes, eventually the White House changed. Because they marched, America became more free and more fair. Not just for African Americans, but for women and Latinos, Asians and Native Americans, for Catholics, Jews and Muslims, for gays, for Americans with disabilities. America changed for you and for me. And the entire world drew strength from that example. Whether the young people who watched from the other side of the Iron Curtain and would eventually tear down that wall, or the young people inside South Africa who would eventually end the scourge of apartheid. Those are the victories they won, with iron wills and hope in their hearts. That is the transformation that they wrought with each step of their well-worn shoes. That's the debt that I and millions of Americans owe those maids, those laborers, those porters, those secretaries, folks who could have run a company maybe if they'd ever had a chance. Those white students who put themselves in harm's way even though they didn't have to. Those Japanese Americans who were called their own internment. Those Jewish Americans who had survived the Holocaust. People who could have given up and given in, but kept on keeping on, knowing that weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. On the battlefield of justice, men and women without rank or wealth or title or fame liberate us all in ways that our children now take for granted. As people of all colors and creeds live together and learn together and walk together, and fight alongside one another and love one another, and judge one another by the content of our character in this greatest nation on earth. To dismiss the magnitude of this progress, to suggest, as some sometimes do, that little has changed, that dishonors the courage, the sacrifice of those who paid the price to march in those years. Medgar Evers, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, Martin Luther King Jr., they did not die in vain. Their victory was great. But we would dishonor those heroes as well, to suggest that the work of this nation is somehow complete. The arc of the universe may bend towards justice, but it doesn't bend on its own. To secure the gains this country has made requires constant vigilance, not complacency. Whether by challenging those who erect new barriers to the vote, or ensuring that the scales of justice work equally for all and the criminal justice system is not simply a pipeline from underfunded schools to overcrowded jails, it requires vigilance. And we'll suffer the occasional setback. But But we will win these fights. This country has changed too much. People of goodwill, regardless of party, are too plentiful for those with ill will to change history's currents. In some ways, though, the securing of civil rights, voting rights, eradication of legalized discrimination, the very significance of these victories may have obscured a second goal of the march. For the men and women who gathered 50 years ago, we're not there in search of some abstract idea. They were there seeking jobs as well as justice. Not just the absence of oppression, but the presence of economic opportunity. For what does it profit a man, Dr. King would ask, to sit at an integrated lunch counter if he can't afford the meal? This idea that one's liberty is linked to one's livelihood. The pursuit of happiness requires the dignity of work, the skills to find work, decent pay, some measure of material security. This idea was not new. Lincoln himself understood the Declaration of Independence in such terms, as a promise that in due time the weight should be lifted from the shoulders of all men, and that all should have an equal chance. Dr. King explained that the goals of African Americans were identical to working people of all races. Decent wages, fair working conditions, livable housing, old age security, health and welfare measures, conditions in which families can grow, have education for their children, and respect in the community. What King was describing as being the dream of every American. It's what's lured for centuries new arrivals to our shores. And it's along this second dimension of economic opportunity, the chance through honest toil to advance one's station in life, where the goals of 50 years ago have fallen most short. Yes, there have been examples of success within Black America that would have been unimaginable a half century ago.
What up?
No, I'm not the techie person here.
I think the techies are Republican.
Okay.
YouTube
Yeah, we can go, because it's only maybe about 5 minutes more, maybe less, it's just a little bit more that's left there.
So we can go for balance.
Okay, so what we're gonna do then is, we got enough. How many of you saw it?
I saw the second one.
Oh, great, so, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so let's talk, what did you think about it? Is it relevant? What are your thoughts? Anyone? No thoughts? Okay, a lot of thoughts? On to go.
Well, when he said, the freedom for themselves while they witness the subjugation of others. And I think the position he finds himself in the past week or two, as it relates to Syria, and where do we stand in intervention. And I was also thinking, he talked about young people in this country, but I think he has a lot of insight about young people in other places in the world. So when we bring that back to higher education, I was all tossing in my head. I'm thinking of 50 years ago, who thought that higher education would be such a global, I mean, once in a while, someone from another country was in a financial position to be funded to come to be educated across the world. Now, thousands and thousands of young people are moving around this planet as we speak to receive an education in a country that they will either influence and or get their education in return and influence elsewhere. In higher education, this is a constant. Talk about change being a constant. This is a constant now. And, you know, it's just up in the air in terms of, I'm all over the place. I was even thinking about 50 years ago, how many Americans were born in a community and they lived and died in that same community? Off the top of my head, I'd say 70 or 80%. I'd say 50 years later, it's probably a switch. Maybe 20%, I mean, you can anybody disagree with me, but I'm making this up. I think 20 or 30% of Americans are born it's less than 20. So we're moving so much around our own country and internationally. How does that not shake up this thing with corporate? How does it not, higher education, how does it not shake it up that you're moving from your early childhood education, your whole life, constantly bombarded by this constant change? So that's where I am. I'm all over the place.
You're, but you know, you're thinking about it all. You're trying to see it all and make sense of it. Yeah.
Where he's positioned as the first black president, and look at the arena both at home and abroad. What does this say, to other nations about, we want you to have these rights for your people. How will we look at them?
Very good. Thank you. Yes.
The decade of the 60s, when this took place, was so turbulent throughout the world. There were wars, Vietnam, and other places, and then there were wars within our boundaries. And it's just a different time, and it's a different mindset. We're not out in our country going out and burning down Newark, Detroit, Chicago, Crown Members. That's what science was saying. We're not doing that. But underneath that, there is a current of resistance to accepting other folk, making a very interesting point about people moving about. Those that remain are in control of their territory. And those that are moving in ultimately need to deal with the controllers.
You mean politically?
Politically, economically, socially, educationally.
Yeah.
It's not such a wide open society as we think it is. It's very controlled and very tightly controlled by those who are in place. And it's something that has to be wrestled with.
Fantastic. Anyone else? Yes, Mike.
I'd like to look at current issues and try to relate them back to these issues. I graduated from high school in 1963. Virtual schools, charter schools, distance education, St. Thomas Aquinas playing football on national TV, and within 10 miles of us, there's probably 100 segregated schools. And so, what does that tell us? What are the implications for education, for society, and for higher education? Well, it would be easy to say, and I'm sort of saying it to myself, that maybe we haven't come so far. And the part here where that would be fair to the people that made all these sacrifices 50 years ago to say that. But maybe we need to re-examine what those people gave us. They gave us the realization, among other things, that this wasn't right. And take a look at some of these systematic changes that haven't been made. I realize Brown versus the Board of Education was modified by the Supreme Court a decade or two ago. So the schools like North Miami can be all black or all 99% black. But I haven't seen very much concern about that on the part of the people who think that what King said and what Obama are saying are important. I'm sort of mystified by that. It doesn't affect me personally, but it certainly affects me as a person who's grown up over the last 68 years. We're missing something.
Thank you.
You mentioned in this speech something about fire, and I guess it's like rekindling the fire because it really ties into the other 9/11. It was the fire. It's like, what does it, it's like it has to be a tragedy. It has to be something to light the fire, rekindle the fire, to eliminate injustice. Other than that, everybody, even people here, you know, we've got so much in our own plate that it takes something else to move it up. And it's interesting because once something else happens, we get glued to the TV, we get all involved in an issue. It's like sometimes you're trying to escape or you just, oh, I don't believe that, or just crazy stuff. But it seems to be that. As a matter of fact, if you watch the news, it's not news if it's not bad anymore. I mean, it's just like you can't even find good news anymore because it's not considered news. Connecting this and the March on Washington, which I always tell people I was there, and then connecting that with the 9/11, and look at the reaction. I mean, boom, suddenly. And when you look at that now, Syria. So suddenly it seems to be, what does it take for people to just move it? It seems like you have to keep rekindling that fire and something happen in order to try to right justice. And I don't know why we as a people do that. I mean, like the United States, but we just seem to be into that.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that it is sometimes those tragedies when we're just all Americans. We're all citizens of the world. And then as it fades away a little bit, we go back into whatever our little worlds, our own little worlds are, and we forget about that spirit of caring for one another.
But I think, you know, Monica, that the civil rights issue was internal. There was this force that was to be dealt with, thankfully, and sustained. I think the complacency of the American people post 9/11, it was this external thing, it was visual, and something that most Americans, quite frankly, have very little understanding in terms of us and them. The us and them in America is more contentious because we're all here. The us and them with people around the world. I mean, most people can't tell you the countries that border these countries. They can't tell you the economy. They can't tell you anything. So we would, my feelings are that post 9/11, it's like, you know, that thing that pops up and then as soon as it goes away, it's like, good enough, it's gone away, leave us alone.
It's like a little game at the carnival where the thing
Right,
pops
the
up,
thing
you
pops
whack
up,
with
you're
the
right,
mallet,
the thing
and
you're
then when you
right.
make it go away, but you get prize when you make it go away, right?
So I don't think that no matter how global we profess to be, I do not think Americans are connected to, in a global community. We have very little understanding, whether it's to what went on in South Africa. It becomes a brief connection, but we don't get it.
Even within the
And
country,
even our
though.
higher education doesn't do a good job of giving us those connections.
Ronnie, even within the country, you know, like when I go out and visit my kids out in Colorado,
Feels
saying
like
I grew up
another
out in the shadow of New York, they're like, wow. I mean, like to them, that's a foreign country.
So is
Because
Florida.
it's and kids that
Well,
out there
I've been
went
to Colorado and so is Florida.
and they've
Florida-
never seen a
Florida's
beach,
the same
you know? I mean,
problem.
their cultural experience is so completely different from my girls.
But you know what we're saying, really?
So really,
Tip O'Neill, what is speaker, said, you know, politics are local. If you're a soldier on a battlefield, your battle is personal. You fight one on the basis of it. Our lives are very controlled and very small circumference. We live within our boundaries.
what
What
information.
we're hearing through news, education, and other ways is just information that's being inputted to us. We're not living out there.
And let me throw out something that might be really a controversial thought, but, you know, we talk about being culturally competent. How many of our courses are?
Oh.
How many of our courses come from the perspective of the professor only, and don't account for the diversity and the change, you know, whatever,
That's exactly right.
you know, our student population might be, or whatever population they might be working with.
Well,
I was 16 when Dr. King spoke in Washington, D.C. And I was comparing it to what Obama was saying, is that Obama began early in the speech by saying all men are created equal. At the age of 16, when they were in Washington, D.C., I was living in Georgia, farm and everything else. And I understood the impact of those words that all men are created equal. In your elementary or junior high school, in your history course, you read the document that says all men are created equal. When you read Lincoln Gettysburg's address, the last part of it says all men are created equal. Many of the issues that they had then and many of the issues they have now hinge on the fact that we, many of us, individually and collectively, have not come to the grips with, accepted, totally complete, that all men and women are created equal. If you look at the schools, why is one dilapidated, ghetto-ish, and the other is the best of the best? Someone made a decision based on their justification there, because this group is not equal to that group, that one deserves a lot of money, the best lab, the best teacher, so on and so on. Well, they did consciously or unconsciously. When you look at the women issues today, men have gone crazy, making these crazy extreme policies that have an impact on women. And yet women are not a part of, legit part of that decision-making process. You got these committees, boards, men are making decisions about women, because men still have not come to that thing that women are created equal. And when you see and feel and think that way, you create justification for it. I'm a man, I'm a male, she's a female. I'm black, I'm white, I'm Hispanic, I'm this, I'm that. So when you look now at higher education, I keep saying to people who will listen to my little way that it's not racial. When you look at higher education, and those who get and those who don't get, it's not the color of the skin that is prohibiting all from getting a chance to go to college, everyone. It's financial segregation. It's not racial segregation, it's financial segregation. When I went to college, I went on federal financial aid, which in the financial aid package was this. You got more in grant and less in loan. So when millions and millions of people began to take advantage of that, they flipped it. Now you get less grant and more loan. It's financial segregation. Simply because we have not come to grips with the fact that all men and women are created equal. If we ever do that, then there will be no need to create these fictional justifications that because you are raised by your mother alone, or because you have done this, or because you look this way, or because you behave that way, because you do that, then you don't deserve the same opportunities, finance, etc., as the other. We create ways and means to justify why we treat each other differently. That's why the 1%, their wealth has gone up, etc., high.
By 40%.
And the others have gone down, low. Because we have not come to the grips. 63, etc., and now, that all men and women are created equal.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, Ron, I gotta jump in.
Okay.
Ralph, I'm with you on all of this. But the key is, we live in a democracy, but we also live in a capitalistic society. Give it up. I mean, that's the harshest reality is.
My response to this, and I keep saying this, just because people know better, it does not mean they want to do better.
They're not going to
We
do
all
better.
know better.
They're not
But
going to
many
do
of us,
better.
for our selfish reasons, choose not to do better.
And our government and private enterprise are coming to these issues with moving forward for their attainment of wealth. And so switching it from grants to loans, you have many, many more people accessing the system. And there's just so much money there, so you're never gonna get, you're talking really about a society, quite frankly, the dirty words, of socialism or communism. When people are all told and all have equal access. I don't know that America's ready for that. We like our individual rights.
It's interesting the things that have happened in the military in the last few years. Equal benefits for spouses, no matter what their gender may be. The opening up of all branches of the military to females, which a lot of people think, well, how is that going to work? How's it happened historically? It's always happened. Personally, the reason I'm an Iowa farm boy is because my mother from New York City joined the Marine Corps and met an Iowa farm boy. Moved out of Manhattan to get into Iowa. So the women have used the military as a way to either get out of or get into places they wanted to get out of or get into, Iowa. And so, you know, I'm a grateful, I won't say believer. I think that these kinds of changes are going to happen slowly. Maybe they're happening too slowly, and maybe there's a lot of movements the wrong direction. But I think it would be impossible to come to the conclusion that positive changes are not being made. Then we just have to talk about why they're being made so slowly. I can't understand, for example, why we're accepting for-profit K-12 schools. I just don't get that when everybody says there's not enough money in education today. That's got to be a strong one. That's got to be incorrect. For-profits wouldn't be getting into public education today.
Let me give you another extreme. You look at all of the members of Congress, the House, and the Senate. They all have great federal health care for them and their families. Why in the world would they want to deny it to others?
Thank you.
Good point.
Those that
Because
have.
it's too costly to provide it.
No, because they, in their mind, have concluded that they are not worthy of
Thank you.
partaking of the same thing that I have. Neither of those people are going to give up their federal health care. They're not going to give up their federal medical.
Nobody gives up their perks.
They're not going to demand that their parents give up their Medicare and Medicaid nor their Social Security. All of those are federal dollars. Because they feel that their families deserve it and others don't. I keep saying to people, it's not taking one penny out of Ralph Ho's pocket to give health care
To everybody.
to everybody.
To everybody, exactly.
And Ted Cruz, who came from Canada, well, they have it for the whole country.
Right.
And he grew up partaking of that, he and his family, opposed to it now that he is want to be president of this United States of America.
Now he's in the
It's
elite.
hypocrisy.
I'm going to show my age here. I graduated from college in '62. Right? I was teaching already. And I can tell you, and I participated in many walk-ins and things in Manhattan, in New York City. If someone had told me 50 years later that we would be where we are today, I would say, no way can we do this. Because we were naive, we had high hopes, we believed in human nature. We did not realize that the elitism in this country is so strong and subtle. I went to a state college. I was a ghetto Puerto Rican kid. English is my second language. And I got admitted to New York State SUNY in Oswego, okay? When I graduated, I didn't know a penny. Because education for those of us who studied in that, at those times, in the late 50s and early 60s, you could go for free. Try now to get our children into a college, even a community college, and what the cost is. So the subtlety has occurred. It has been very subtle, but that's still a barrier. When we say that we educate all our children, no, we don't educate all our children. Some get mediocre education, and those that have the money and the wherewithal will find that they have tutors for their children, and they can go to that beautiful, be it public or private school. Why do we have charter for profits? Because that's another way to have my child go to an elite school, but not saying it. No, it's a community school. So to me, I sit here and I hear, and to me it's very sad, it really is, Ralph, to think that here so many of us were out there and we really thought there was going to be change. And what happened was the ground rules changed. Every time we think that we're getting there to that goal, the rules are changed. And so it's up to us to, I think, just keep pressing little by little, by you writing, by you having these sessions, by us talking about it. Because we can't let, we just cannot let the children that come behind us not have the opportunities that we have. That's all I'm gonna say.
I take it, you know, I appreciate and I respect everything you said, that I lived through the same period of time. And you're talking about dilapidated schools. I don't believe there are dilapidated schools. I believe there are dilapidated neighborhoods and residences. And the school happens to be a part of that. We're putting the cart before the horse. What we need to do is get the structure, the foundation leveled out. And then we could all have the same medical benefits, the same elaborate schools, the same everything else. We have not addressed that issue. And the biggest mistake we made back in the 60s was to say, I'm gonna take a kid who was 7 years old, get him up at 5:30 in the morning, 12 on a bus, and transform across the city for an hour and a half till he gets to school. What do you have today? You have.
Let me respond to this. I was born and raised in Georgia, but my mother lived here. Some summers I would come down here, and she lived in Overtown. Do any of y'all know what Overtown is? All right. So when I was there in the 50s, Overtown was the Harlem in its heyday. The doctors and lawyers, and you had hotels and motels, nightclubs there. It was great. But what happened? Whites made a decision to run I-95 directly through the center of Overtown. Directly through the center of Overtown, where I used to play, I used to skate there. I used to go to 2 movies, Martin, and so it was great. You know, yeah, the doctors, they had it all there. And so the government government domain just took over control. Forced them out, gave them pennies, and where do they go? They went to the projects, 60th Street, 17th Avenue, to the projects. The projects are still there. Go through it now, 67th Street, Northwest, 17th Avenue. The projects are still there. Drugs, welfare mothers, unwed, you know, et cetera, et cetera. They did that too. When you look at throughout the United States then, those who had the power and authority made those kind of decisions. And today they still are treating these communities unfair. They never got what they needed and deserved like everybody else, like they provided for their families.
That's a microcosm of your experience. And let me tell you, in New York City, there's a man by the name of Robert Moses who divided up the 4 boroughs of New York City, not Staten Island, by a highway system and divided all ethnic neighborhoods to the extent that there was a thing called white flight, because basically he was running these highways right through white Jewish middle class neighborhoods. White flight took place and Long Island became a place to live. Staten Island became a place to live. Westchester.
To make that problem
not-
look like it wasn't a problem.
That's true.
So what's the role of higher education to re-examine these issues?
Let me
People
do
are on this
this,
table
let me
pretty
do this as we get to this other part of this, because I see some things already sort of coming together, with these 2 phenomenons that we're talking about today. So let me do this and sort of bring us to that, that discussion that we'll go away with today.
Because December, D-Day, they don't want days.
Standard Time, American Airlines Flight 11 bound for Los Angeles crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It was initially believed to be an accident.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
Plane was coming in, I noticed in a second before it hit the building, it looked like it was moving slowly. It lined itself up to hit the building directly.
At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, also bound for Los Angeles, slammed into the South Tower, causing an explosion in the building's upper floors. At 9:29, President Bush calls the crashes an apparent terrorist attack. At 9:32, the New York Stock Exchange closes as terror grips Manhattan. At 9:37, American Airlines Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon, causing the building to burst into flames. At 9:45 in Washington, D.C., the White House and Capitol building begin evacuations. At 9:46, the FAA grounds all flights. It's the first time in U.S. history that air traffic nationwide has been halted. At 9:51, the Pentagon updates its alert status to Delta, the highest level possible. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center crumbles to the ground. At 10:06, United Airlines Flight 93, headed for San Francisco, crashes in rural Pennsylvania. At 10:15, a section of the Pentagon collapses. At 10:22, the state and justice departments in Washington are evacuated, along with the World Bank. At 10:24, the FAA orders all international flights bound for the United States diverted to Canada. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. 7 hours later, at 5:20 p.m., the 47-story Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex also falls to the ground. At 6:54 p.m., President Bush returns to the White House. At 8:30, almost 12 hours after the initial attack, President Bush addresses the nation from the Oval Office. The 110-story north and south towers of the World Trade Center were once among the tallest buildings in the world. A great void will forever remain in the New York skyline as well as in the hearts of millions of Americans.
fact that these were two most powerful events. This morning, as you know, this is September 11th, as we all know. This morning at 8:46, just to watch the White House lawn as Joe and Jill and Barack and Michelle walked out on the lawn, surrounded by the folk. I'm pretty sure you saw it, the folks who came and everything, and just to come out, and the tax and the dignity to all of that in remembrance. You can't be human if it doesn't touch you, you know. These are the things that I think that that is so important that we reflect on even more than we do, because it speaks to our humanity. It speaks to us coming to grips again with our ideas as to, yes, I see this, what can I do? If you remember at the end of Obama's speech, he did not advocate getting out there marching with protest signs and stuff and everything anymore. But he said that we do march. We march every time individually as we do certain things that brings the level of our society up a notch or two. So he says, keep marching, doing this. If the only thing, I won't say only with quotation marks around it, that we're doing is say we're having a once a month scholars roundtable and forum where we share and maybe come up with some ideas that we leave here, we're going to try this or this or this. That's marching, as Obama would say. That's marching, okay? When we can be sympathetic with those who lost lives and whatever in that tragedy, 9/11, and maybe urge senators and representatives in their own sphere to do whatever needs to be done. That's marching. And then as we went to this video clip, Mike had asked the question, so what does that have to do with higher education? That's where we live and breathe every day, right? So we wanted to sort of bring this back and kind of frame it around there. Do we see higher education in this picture at all? And if we do, where do we see it?
Well, in one way, I could say, I'm going back to the point that you made about capitalism, and I think you just also have to be mindful about the forces that are attacking higher ed and saying that we need to stop offering courses that are going to cultivate people who are civic-minded and the force to just offer courses that are going to make you make money. And I think we're going too much in a direction now of, oh, you have to look at what are the top 10 degrees to have to make money. And I think when higher ed starts, you know, catering to that mindset, then we lose. Then we lose.
Well, we're a profit-making organization, so we will always cater to that mindset.
Well, it seems like
more and more you have private
starting
education and
Yeah.
higher education, you're gonna be looking at degree programs. You've got a very good point there.
You
Well,
know,
it's excellent. You can't go onto Yahoo any week and not see that list.
yes, it's
So we
a problem.
These teaching and education are not listed. Was just not there. But you've got the medical and you've got the, the dental and you've got all these other high paying.
That's a very interesting observation, but I don't think.
The money, I got news here, folks. You can't deny the fact that money talks. It has a very loud voice, especially if you're hungry.
Speaking of that, I saw a headline relative to, I think, our conversation, relative to this, that says institutions are now grappling with the cost of health insurance for adjunct faculty. Did anybody see that?
Yahoo.
I'm sorry?
Yahoo had it. Yeah.
Read that sentence again.
Institutions are grappling with cost of health insurance, because remember, for adjunct faculty. So then the question there, because I know, like institutions like ours, look at the number of adjunct faculties that we have, and we have to provide insurance for them, health insurance.
26 hours a week, you have to provide health insurance.
So what do you
That's 3
think,
courses.
what do you think institutions are gonna do with that? Because that's gonna be more expensive.
Anybody who teaches more than 3 courses has a legitimate argument that they should be allowed health care. We allow our adjuncts to teach up to 15 or 18 credits unconscionably, in my opinion. So, I'd love to see the adjuncts organize and say, listen, there's my,
But do they have to even organize? Do they have to organize to get
they
this?
shouldn't have to, but I
Exactly.
think they should.
What an age-old question.
Adjuncts are more organized.
Yeah, yeah. So, and in that article, the articles that I read relative to this are on the internet at diverseeducation.com. It talked about how various institutions are restructuring what they do so that they don't
So
have to
that would be a good indicator if this organization decides to say we're going to reduce the number of courses an adjunct could teach, not because that's too much work for a person who's working full-time, but because we want to keep them under the minimum number of hours for healthcare. If our organization says that, we who are full-timers ought to be, I don't care what Obama says about marching, we should be placards on the 5th floor or at the Horowitz building, because that's not right. It's a pretty good indicator if your organization says we're going to reduce everybody's hours below 26, McDonald's or wherever. McDonald's doesn't do that, by the way. Just to keep them off of, we don't have to pay for health care. That's a pretty good indicator that that organization is not one you want to work for, in my opinion.
And yet, in the economy like it is now, as Robert said a while ago, and some of you said, it goes, unfortunately, it goes back to the money issue.
You can always opt out and save money in the short term. But if you think that your organization is one that's strong and needs strong people in order to be successful, then you don't opt out in the short run. You may have to curtail things in the short run, because in the long run, the issues that we're talking about, a well-supported collection of people to work for you, no matter what the organization, that ultimately is equated with success, no matter what some might say. The same way with education. We talk about, one of the reasons education is so good is so many good people get into it. And that's never going to show up on that Yahoo list or the new publication that came out in U.S. News and World Report. But it's my observation that you have a lot more people who are pretty highly motivated and dedicated to education, who at least try it. They're not up.
But they can't stay in it.
I'm taking a course now through Coursera. You know these courses that you can take anywhere in the world, whatever. Okay, look. I'm taking an amazing course, 20 weeks, and I'm not doing it for credit. And every Sunday, I get my coffee, I'm like ready to go. And the course is called A Brief History of Humankind. It's a killer. I mean, I can't even jump on the discussion. I'm like, what? I can't even get it. Having said that, it's an overview of Homo sapiens. And it's an amazing look at what moved bands of people. It's getting into everything from food sources to how we moved around the planet. Okay, the comment that I want to make, jump over what I'm saying, there's a part where the professor is grappling with the issue of what groups can sustain dialogue and interaction that keeps the group, if you will, flourishing. And that is a group of people, up to about 100 to 150 people, can do what's best in the best interest of their band, if you will, tribe, band, group. And he goes as far as to say, from 40,000 years ago, 70,000 to today, he gives examples of the fact that in an army, you can take, I don't know the name of people, the order from someone even higher up, that the people will disregard that order because of their alliance to their brigade leader or whatever, okay? And in a culture of an organization, as big as Nova or any other, if it's thousands of people large, you'll dismiss that. Typically, and he talks about gossip, and how gossip has sustained cultures for thousands of years. I felt like saying to him, hear me, check out Fischler, you want to talk about culture? So the thing is that when you get big like this, it's not, and guess what, when I was taking the course, when I was listening to this comment, schools don't function, in my opinion, when they get beyond that. That's how I feel. I mean, I'm happy to be at this institution, I love it, I love the people, I love the paycheck, but truthfully, I believe smaller institutions are what educate people.
And by the way, that course is available in the library on CDs.
Oh, it is.
It's called A Brief History of Humankind. It used to be called Mankind. And it's on CDs. If you don't want to take the move, you just
exactly. It's very cool.
listen to them in the car.
Yeah.
Another relative article I saw was, is standardized testing for colleges a necessary evil?
The answer is no.
The answer is no.
But then you have people that have to be able to say, okay, you can't cut it, adios.
Yeah, but most, I mean, have their professional tests that they have to pass for licensure, certification, and that kind of thing. And I think we would be ridiculous if we started to do college level FCAT test.
We have the GKT for education, and I used to work in UTEP for a while, and we had a course called EDUC 1010, and there's a math for writing, and there's a math correspondent, because what was happening was students would be seniors at the UTEP, and they'd do their internship, and they would graduate, and they still had trouble passing the GKT.
It's
So
general
what we-
knowledge.
Yeah, general knowledge test. So what we did was, they put a policy in place that if you hadn't passed your 3 sections yet, you couldn't register for your internship, and they had tutoring and these classes and everything. And I worked with many people, and some of them just didn't know for writing that they wanted a certain structure, a beginning, a thesis, a middle, and an end. They just thought they could write what they thought for 40 minutes, clearly, coherently, but if it didn't have a structure, it didn't pass. And I'm not sure what the math is, but I've always gotten extra help in tutoring and stuff in math, because I just, a math phobia. But, I mean, basically, what would be that's what UTEP looked at. What's the point of graduating people if they can't pass the GKT? How are they gonna pass their license? And that's when the state of Florida can come back to us and say, they're not doing well in the classroom, they didn't get their license test, they're not this. At least now we're helping them need what they, get what they need to get. And they have to have that GKT pass too, or they can't get a license in Florida. You move here from somewhere else, you've got to take that GKT, then you take your license.
All right.
Am I walking away depressed or happy?
Wow, we
Join
hope
the
you
human
get
race. A little bit, please.
I don't think me either.
We hope that from the depression will come joy, because you're gonna take that and go out and save the world. Yeah, you're gonna go out and save the world. Okay, all right. Let's come back to, this comment that Mickey made a little while ago, was looking at the curriculum as we talk about diversity. We have to think about, when we think about these groups, let's say back in the 60s, blacks, whites, for the most part, and we look at the whole business of the groups, ethnic groups that were involved in the 9/11 business and that were still involved. And now other groups, we're looking at the majority, minority now being in the numbers for Hispanics and also. So we're really looking at a lot of diversity, right? So when we look at a lot of diversity, we have to wonder, do we find it in merit in the statement that we should be a more unified society, supporting each other, blah, say, blah, 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 okay? If that was the case then, and let's just say, are we there? Do we think that way? Is there merit? Then would we not be looking at our curriculum a little bit more to see, studying it and reviewing it a little bit more to see whether or not it's doing what it needs to do to prepare citizens to make their contributions in the world, okay? I'm just throwing this out right now. And then another article that I saw is that now the rate or the percentage of Hispanics enrolling in higher education has now exceeded the white percentage, but on the other hand, the graduation rate is lower. All right? So, did I get you thinking? Yes.
You got me thinking. I'm trying to convince a doctoral student to do this research study, to poll professors who have taught a number of courses at a distance, see if they can identify what percentage of the students in their classes are female, what percentage are black, what percentage are white, and what percentage are Hispanic or other ethnicities. To see if the professors can really tell, and then compare that to the actuality by actually looking at the records. The preliminary indication is that most distant professors can't do it. Most of them don't even pay attention to students' names. Now, that's not always the case. There's also an awful lot of motivation to get a picture and get a bio, and with some of the names you can kind of tell what the person's ethnicity is. But a significant number of professors who teach online don't pay any attention to the things that the face-to-face teacher can't help but pay attention to, because it's right there in front of them.
But should they? Is there merit to paying attention to them?
Well,
I think
that's the
there
point.
is
Okay, that's
some,
the point.
but I think there
This
is
is an
some.
interesting, positive, unanticipated consequence of online education.
Isn't that converting a profession to a job?
No, Well, you've
Nothing that takes you
got
to
to
the
balance
student.
the human side and getting to know the student. But this particular study is just one that is looking at whether the professor pays attention to and is aware of the ethnicity and the gender of the students in the class.
Isn't there a level of sensitivity?
Well, maybe there is. Maybe there's a level of
And
bias
a
too.
whole different
Maybe there's a level of
conversation.
discrimination too.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a level
It's not
of,
like selling someone a pair of shoes, it's the same.
and of course, it's a multifaceted issue. But it may be, well, it obviously seems to be an unanticipated consequence of online learning. Whether it's always for good or necessarily bad is
Very
the next step.
interesting.
So that then would generate more research and review from committees, oversight committees that have the responsibility for looking at things that will help will help the student and the institution succeed.
Yeah, and I think that
And most research today is built upon previous research. There was a lot of research done in the 60s and earlier that said third grade teachers should not share their comments with the fourth grade teacher about children because that would prejudice the teacher. He was really dumb, and then fourth grade, that kid may not be so dumb.
And yet they still go to the lunchroom and talk about
I think
that
they're
kind of
not
stuff.
supposed to, but I think they do.
Yeah.
Well, what was that classic study, I'm trying to think of the name, it's years ago in California where they gave out a list of kids' names and enlisted numbers beside it, the name of it. And the teacher she thought, oh, I've got to change my whole curriculum. I've got all these brilliant kids in my class because all the numbers were well over 100. She thought it was IQ scores. It was locker numbers.
Oh my God.
So she taught the kids in a way that she thought they were all gifted, and the kids all prospered, and
And they will prosper.
they all did well.
Raise the standard, folks, don't lower it.
Okay, Ralph, we're gonna take a couple more comments. then we'll
I have a question in terms of diversity. Two things. One is 9/11, the terrorists were not interested in killing only whites, only blacks, only Hispanics.
Just American.
The question is, in terms of diversity and in terms of teaching and learning, what can we do individually, collectively to get to the point where difference does not make a difference to me?
I don't know that.
What can we do to get to the level where we don't look for differences?
Is that the goal that you
And
want?
even if we see or find differences, that it does not make any difference to me. I think that is where we need to begin to focus on, is that many of us look for differences.
There is a classic study.
Many people look for,
that says
many people look, if my name is Malik, so what's wrong? There are people look for those names. On the phone, they look for a certain voice. Well, they speak standard English in a certain way, et cetera, well, you know, and we go back to all of those. But my point is, what do we need? Diversity, I think, need to get us to a position where we don't look for it. And even if we find it, it does not make a difference.
Okay, I don't think you need to put in waking hours going, look at what, because it's so obvious it's there, boom, 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 boom. All you gotta do is just wake up and open your eyes and smell the coffee, whatever the deal may be. But the other part of the last part of your statement was, what are we going to do about it? That's where the effort comes in. If we know we've got an overwhelming number of Hispanics in our classroom, now how are we equipped to make sure that they are successful as students, you know? Those are the questions that should come to our minds, not that, you know, they can't measure up or whatever. What do we have in terms of skills? Because when we got our certification to teach, we didn't really have to think about different ways, too many different ways of learning. We know there are different ways of learning. Different people learn in different kinds of ways. But we should be, if we're in the classroom, be it K-12 or in the post-secondary classroom or whatever,
that awareness has to be there, and then we have to ask ourselves, are we equipped to meet it? Now, here's just a very, very quick example, I know we almost ran out of time here, is that I have often wondered, what does Fisher say about people from other countries, or students from other countries, and I've had dissertations like this, where they sort of write in their own language, but yep, you say, you gotta do APA 5th, and you gotta go by the da-da-da-da, and then, you get, they know what they're saying, but they're not saying it right. So what are we to do with that, is the question.
And that goes all the way back to the opening statement you made, it's about the globalization. I mean, even the language we use may not be understood by the students.
Exactly,
And I'll give you a very simple example of that. I'm a psychometrist, so I do a lot of testing. And one of the Wechsler IQ tests had to change some of their language because as the use of that test grew, and you've probably used that before, we found that some of the language kids within the United States didn't understand. Like if I gave the test in the Northeast, the word was, you find a lost pocketbook. When I gave that test in Alabama, kids had no idea what a pocketbook was. Because to them, it's purse.
Well, it's the same thing
That
with geography.
simple
Things
thing.
like beach, like I'm from Florida. I didn't understand snow. I got every question wrong about snow.
I flew into San Antonio International Airport, which was about as long as this room, in 1964. Got off the plane in my uniform, went into the coffee shop, ordered coffee in the Danish. I'm slow anything from that damn Danish. I have no clue.
They thought you wanted a Danish.
My wife ordered eggs over, right? You know what they did?
Let's
Well,
make,
that's the point, is that I'm sorry.
no, okay, finish.
No, you go.
No, because I'm kind of,
Wrap it up. Keep going.
okay. I want to make Diane and others happy as we leave. So I want us to think about, throw out a couple of positive things as a result of us reflecting, and that was sort of a kind of reflection because of the nature of things. What can we do as we leave here? What are we thinking about as we leave here? Let's share a little bit of that on the other side. Come on now. Oh boy. Come on,
What I'm
Susan.
thinking, I think the thing that resonated with me more than anything else was when Obama said, we've been made here for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And I really believe in that, and things may be slow, but joy is coming, and I'm feeling it.
And so wake up in the morning with that positive attitude that I'm going to do something different
I'll keep marching.
today. All right, okay.
I think to what Edna was talking about, that we don't leave anyone behind. We've been around as Homo sapiens for thousands and thousands of years. If there's one thing I'm taking away from this course, is that it's okay. New generations will come and they will find a way. Human beings have a remarkable, it takes thousands of years, so don't think this thing is over. This is a long show, baby. It is a long show.
Thank you, thank
I'm
you.
gonna keep an eye on the
It's a long
adjunct
show.
health.
Yes.
You gotta do what?
I'm gonna keep an eye on the adjuncts healthcare.
Homo sapiens.
Any other?
But Mike, it's always the money. No matter what, it's the bottom line, kid.
Okay, I'm gonna get Ralph and then you.
I'm gonna renew my membership.
Let me just say this, that when there's a crisis, we all come together, and we support each other.
Yes.
Let's not wait for a
Till the
crisis.
crisis.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's support each other,
Yeah.
all the time.
How you doing?
Fantastic.
Good.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna go back and support the old tried and true. I'm gonna renew my membership in Urban League and the NAACP because they have been there all
Yes,
along.
Oh,
And even though it's not a lot of money,
Take a look at that.
all right, so let's keep thinking. Let's keep 9/11 victims and the families in our prayers and in our thoughts. Let's reflect on all of those folks who died so that we could live, civil rights movement. And let's keep doing the best that we can for humanity and ourselves as we go along. Thank you so much.
Thank you for an excellent program.
Thank you.